So it's not easy to follow a Pulitzer Prize winner, another award-winning best-selling author, and then one of the most quoted scientists in the world. So I really wanted to do a good job today. And while I don't ordinarily wear makeup, I'm especially indebted to the Epicure makeup team for doing a comprehensive cosmetic assessment and application to make sure you could focus on my presentation and less on my hopefully now not as shiny head. Just by show of hands, how many of you have ever heard the expression, a calorie is a calorie? And just by show of hands, how many of you have ever tried to count calories but felt that it wasn't really effective in helping you achieve your personal weight or health-related goals? So again, my name is Sean Lucan, and I promise you there's a better way. I'm a family doctor, and I treat patients like you, like your children, like your parents. I see patients of all ages and all stages of life, and in the families that I care for, I see a lot of obesity. And I see a lot of largely preventable diet and weight-related chronic health issues. Diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, cancer, and others. And as a family doctor and one trained in public health, I recognize that there are many obstacles facing individuals and families trying to eat better. But one of those obstacles should not be misguided or misguiding clinical advice. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I have no financial conflicts of interest and nothing to disclose, except for the fact that I find this concept incredibly unhelpful and detrimental to patients trying to achieve better weight and better health. So what I'm calling calorie-focused thinking here is the idea that consuming more calories or eating more, or expending fewer calories, moving less, causes obesity. So the idea being that if we could somehow just have more self-control, if we could somehow have more willpower or self-discipline, we could eat less and move more and all would be well. And while intuitive and well-meaning and simple, I will argue that this concept creates and blames victims and can make people measurably less healthy. And if you think about it, the whole concept, the whole idea of counting calories doesn't really make a lot of sense. So how many of you think that you can count or determine the actual number of calories you take in? Not just in what you put in your mouth, but what you actually absorb from your food, and simultaneously determine how many calories you're burning, not just on the treadmill, but in all those silent, unnoticeable, ongoing metabolic reactions occurring in your body, and do so with sufficient precision and accuracy to guide real-time behavioral decisions, like how much less you should be eating or how much more you should be exercising. For myself, I went to a pretty decent medical school. I do research on nutrition. I helped co-author a book on the topic. And I can admit to you today that I have precisely no idea how many calories I'm taking in or burning on a daily basis. That said, what I do know is that those two quantities equal each other almost exactly. And I know this because over the last several years, my weight has changed almost not at all. And that's with no conscious effort on my part. And the reason is that calorie intake and calorie expenditure are balanced. They are physiologically coupled. They are matched or paired. One depends on the other. And you can see this in your everyday lives. So think about a time when you might have exerted yourself to an unusual degree. Maybe you went to the gym and did an especially hard workout. Maybe you ran a road race or played all day with your kids. After that activity, did you feel especially hungry? Did you wind up ultimately eating more that day than you otherwise would have? Or think about a time when you tried to consume less than your body needed. Did you feel tired, low energy? Were you disinclined to move? The thing is that things stay relatively stable without increases in weight or decreases unless some uncoupling occurs. So when a patient says to me, "But doc, I swear, I'm choosing only low-calorie foods, I'm trying to control my portions, and I'm really not eating that much. I'm trying to exercise, but I just don't have much energy, and I'm always hungry. I just can't seem to lose any weight." When she says this, I believe her. And I believe her because a calorie is not a calorie. So yes, a calorie is a unit of energy, and 1 unit of energy equals 1 unit of energy, just like 1 unit of anything equals another unit of that same anything. But that is not to say that two different foods having the same energy, having the same number of calories, will have the same biological effect. So different foods will have different effects based on the types of calories they contain, or particularly the composition of calorie-providing components like fat, carbohydrate, protein, and alcohol. So foods of different types may stimulate pathways for appetite versus satiety, or energy burning versus storage. And so not only does a focus on calories completely miss the point, but it may misdirect and misguide well-meaning patients who are trying their best to lose weight and in effect sabotage their efforts. And that's because a focus on calories almost by definition becomes a focus on dietary fat. Fat being the component of food that has the greatest calorie density. So when we talk about reducing calories, we're usually talking about reducing fat or cutting out the fat, or more often, replacing fat with lower calorie carbohydrate. The problem is that higher fat, higher calorie foods are not necessarily bad. Some higher fat, higher calorie foods, like nuts and olive oil and oily fish, are associated with healthier weights and better health and longer life. Conversely, lower calorie, lower fat foods are not necessarily good and may be quite the opposite, as we shall see. So back to the drawing board, or back to the diagram, calorie-focused thinking would tell my patient to choose low-calorie foods and try to control her portions. And then blame her when her hunger and fatigue prevents her from having the willpower to eat less and move more, even as she may become more obese in the process, adding insult to injury. And so another form of thinking, or another way of thinking, helps shift the blame and vindicate my patient. So what I'm calling more nuanced thinking here is the idea that it's not the number of calories in food that matters, it's the type of calories that those foods contain. And particularly, it's calories from rapidly absorbable carbohydrates, so added sugars and refined starches, that are the biggest problem. So what I'm talking about specifically are foods like white rice, white bread, white pasta, white potatoes, particularly the peeled variety that then get processed into snack chips. So these are foods that are essentially isolated starch, which the body immediately and effortlessly converts to sugar. And then there are the products that are engineered directly from sugar. So the candies, the frozen treats, the baked goods, and especially the sugar-sweetened beverages. And then, perhaps less intuitively, there are all the surprising products that the food industry injects obscene amounts of sugar into. So products like the white bread mentioned earlier, products like processed pasta sauce, products like healthy breakfast cereal, low-fat yogurt, and low-calorie, fat-free dressings. So these are foods whose load of rapidly absorbable carbohydrates causes massive fluctuations in blood sugar levels and hormone levels such that they stimulate appetite to eat more, and specifically to eat more starches and sugars. So you create this kind of reinforcing loop, this vicious cycle. And if you haven't read Michael Moss's book, I highly recommend it. It is excellent. He does, yes, applause for Michael Moss. He does a fantastic job of illustrating the food industry's fine-tuned understanding and exploitation of this basic biological fact to keep us craving and hooked so that we're consuming more. And over the long term, over the long term, consuming rapidly absorbable carbohydrates leads to resistance in hormones involved in satiety and energy storage. So what might be called obesity on a metabolic level. And that leads to powerful signals in the brain and to the heart and in the gut and to the muscles to move less and eat more. So what's often put forth as the cause of obesity, moving less and eating more, might actually be the result of becoming obese through food-induced neurohormonal changes. And it's the low-calorie foods that patients are looking for, that public health authorities are directing them towards, that physicians are advising that may be the worst culprits, that may be doing the most damage. So just to give you an example, here's a scenario comparing two different snacks, a handful of walnuts versus a piece of cake. Now, even though these snacks are both the same size, 100 grams in this case, the walnuts have almost twice as many calories and about 5 times as much fat. And so even though the cake is already lower in calories, we could probably rely on the food industry to concoct some low-fat version of the cake, which would have even fewer calories and shift some of that fat into more carbohydrate and starch, making the difference, the substantial difference here even wider. So the question I want to ask is this: is cake a healthier, more weight-friendly snack than nuts? And would low-fat cake be even better? So exactly right. I mean, the opposite is true. So whole foods like nuts are filling. So even though they have more calories, they're satiating, and they tend to guard against continued eating and continued calorie intake, so that overall calorie intake for the day will be lower. Plus, nuts are foods that are associated with healthier weight and better health and maybe even longer life. And that's in spite of the calories and maybe even because of the fat. Conversely, refined products like cake drive hunger and compel us to eat more. So these refined products literally program us to overeat and to eat more of the wrong kinds of foods, the kinds of foods that make us fat and the kinds of foods that make us sick. So they cause neurohormonal changes that promote obesity and related diseases like diabetes. So the problem is ultra-processed products designed by industry. I think that's a theme today, right? So it's these foods that are driving us to eat more and move less, making us have less healthy weight and overall less health. The solution is whole, real food, right? So not food designed by industry, but food designed by nature. So I'm talking about nuts, I'm talking about seeds, vegetables, fruits, and as Dr. Agarwal would so compellingly argue, spices, right? So these are the foods that make eating less and moving more possible, supporting healthier weight and overall better health. So my final thoughts are these. Healthy eating is about overall food quality, not food calories. So yes, calories absolutely count, but consumers should not be counting calories. Consumers should be choosing foods that make control of their calories happen unconsciously. They should be choosing whole, real foods. So my advice is to enjoy natural whole foods, irrespective of their calorie or fat content. And to be sure to choose foods from living botanical plants, not industrial processing plants. And I think Sarah Elton would agree with that point and make the case that that's not only the right move for individual health, but for overall planetary health. So that's the case I wanted to make today. I wanted to thank all of you for your attention and for being here and supporting this wonderful event, and for Epicure for inviting me, all the other presenters for allowing me to share the stage. It was really quite an honor. If you are interested in this topic, these are just some references to some short papers that I've written in a similar vein. And if you want to get in touch with me, my email is there, and ways to reach out by social media. So I wish you all healthy eating and the best of health.